All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Takedown Breakdown here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. This week, got my man Belman 967. Matt is here with me. Going to break down all things from this past weekend, going through we have it this week. We got the tournament winners. We got the perfect lineup. We're going to look at some of the tools and stuff over at Ship It Nation. Had another big week, huge momentum for the nation as the season continues in both NFL and NBA, where you can find our man Matt, and he was in the NFL streets this week too. If you didn't know, he's now doing an NFL slate plan on the site. He's in the Discord breaking things down. Matt, what's going on, my man? How you doing on this fine Monday morning?
I am doing okay, man. Dealing with some personal stuff, as you know about, but excited to put that aside for at least an hour so we can talk some. Yesterday's slate was a fun one. I heard you on I heard you and Alex talk on Leverage Lane about how this might be the week that chalk finally fails, and while it all didn't fail, certainly some of it did, and that was prevalent in the contest on Sunday.
Yeah, we can start there. I know we always get to the perfect lineup and everything here soon, and some folks in the chat talking about things and how their week went. But I really love this slate. It didn't fully work out for me. I had another good run at the FanDuel thing. It's funny, when you post some stuff, and people start hitting up on someone's like, "Oh, that wasn't really that close," but it's like they don't really know. They don't enjoy the sweat with you. And I actually had the late swap. I'll talk about it after, but I was just one play away, and I have the little screenshot of it. The ball is this close from 100K, so it's like it was right there. It was a nice chance again, but the momentum keeps building. A ton of members had success. I'll pull that up shortly, but let's start with the Drake London is out news. Bijan Robinson is massively owned. Any thoughts on that now? I mean, this is what's so important about waiting for injury news and thinking about things and thinking through them. Again, I don't want to be results oriented, but I think there was some clear takeaways for me that I didn't adjust on either. That, you get after the fact, as soon as lock hits, you're like, oh, wait, this is a thought I just had. And now it breaks down into this. So got to be on top of it. But what was your thoughts on that? And then how it played out for guys like Mooney and Bijan and some of that stuff?
So I was a little bit eerie of Bijan's ownership like all week. I still played so much of him. I was even over the field. My best lineups obviously didn't have him. When Mooney was out, it didn't change a ton for me, honestly. Like, I get it, especially after the fact. Miami can focus.
When London was out, you said Mooney, but when London was out, did it change anything for you with Mooney? That's actually a good segue there.
So, yeah, I think it made Mooney definitely more appealing. He was higher owned than he was going to be. It wasn't like he was crazy highly owned, but he looked better. Now, to answer your question about Bijan, I certainly think now, especially after the fact, you can look at it and say, well, Miami can focus so much of their attention now on Bijan on the run. But on the same token, like Miami stinks. They've been bad all year. They've given it up to running backs all year. It didn't work out. And he was probably just too highly owned in general for how many good plays there were on the slate. But I don't think I can look back on it and be like Bijan or Mooney for that matter. And I'm interested to hear your Mooney talks were like bad plays. Atlanta just wasn't good. Cousins clearly wasn't good. So maybe adjust going forward. But I don't know. Tough to sit here and be like armchair quarterback in a really good spot that was.
Yeah, the biggest thing was, and we talk about this every week, of like the optimal versus that. Like the ownership got out of hand on Bijan. Like it got up to almost 60% in the $20 Millie Maker. I honestly don't remember the last time we've seen a almost $9,000 player of any kind be that type of ownership. You get a backup running back, we'll see 60%. You get Bucky Irving last season when there's nobody in there, and obviously Sean Tucker came through and they got the birthday boy touchdown yesterday too for all the Rachaad White lovers. But I will say the Bijan stuff got way more. I don't think anybody accounted for anywhere near that. And even sites that were getting, 40, 41, like it was 40 to 45 at most. He's getting up to almost 60% in the $20. At that point, there's, other factors to think of. It's just talking about it. But again, he's a great play on paper. You talk about the fact of the matchup still and still being able to get there. I'm not shaking him. I had him everywhere. I made this mistake and went through with it, but I don't want to say it's a mistake as much as I wasn't cautionary of that fact. It gets really tough to get great leverage at almost 60% in a tournament like that. So I don't want to say it's a bad play. He's not. He had a great matchup. It all made sense. I get that. I'm saying the thought process for me after lock, and we talked a little bit about it. Hoop Title and I at the end of the show yesterday wanted to circle back. Once we got the London news, we stayed on until past inactives, was that maybe it's not as great for Mooney. His price is great, but the idea of now like him being the wide receiver one, the reason Mooney's typically open is because there's Bijan, London they have to account for, and then even Kyle Pitts. And then we thought Kyle Pitts too, and it wasn't like the worst setup, but that's the guy I liked a little bit more than Mooney. But I wasn't going away from Bijan in that spot. It was just eye-opening after the slate started to see that even more piled on based on the Drake London projection going away. It has to be given somewhere. Projections get a little bit of that and start pushing it. Coach Stav said I capped him. Didn't like the fact as a Dolphins fan we suck, but was in a dome. My biggest, like you said, is they can just now bear down on make Kirk Cousins pass to Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, and Casey Washington, and whoever else you want to lump into that. So I guess it's in hindsight thing. There was definitely opportunities and ways to get to Jonathan Taylor and some of those other guys that had these big boy scores. Anything else from that you want to bring up? I'm going to pull up the perfect lineup here, but anything else on the slate that you can think of as we get to this?
Yeah, just on that point, really to finish it off and correct me if I'm wrong, but taking the words out of your mouth a little bit, you didn't say this, but I thought you kind of said this in other words. Knowing what his ownership was after the fact, 60%. I mean, that's NBA levels for NFL, which is just crazy. It doesn't really matter how good of a spot he's in. I would have wanted 0 personally, knowing he was going to be that highly owned. There were just a lot of other good spots. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
I was thinking, I don't know if I would definitely wouldn't go to 0. I would say that, but you were on the right track of what I was saying. Like if 60, it's a lot different for those wondering of like, if you're going to look at a guy and we see on the stone, he's 29% to be optimal, but we're seeing like 30 to 33% ownership. And maybe even if it trends up to like 4, it's like, obviously you don't see those numbers very often. There was a lot of alternatives and we'll show it and you can, pull from what you think. The other thing is the Mooney factor. It was funny because it boosted his own guy, Bijan. But I literally had this example yesterday on the show of the Pickens for the Steelers year. He got moved out. Everyone goes to Calvin Austin Jr. It gets them up to Barkley. It ended up getting to more stars and scrubs builds, and not just the optimal, but in a lot of the winning lineups too. You'll see that it was a much more balanced as it can be with a $9,500 JT. But the idea of like a more expensive defense, like even look at this optimal 5K, 6K, 6K, 5K, 5K, and then 4K at tight end is basically balanced. And then 4K Franklin is a lot more than $3,500 guys and $3,000 guys. And he's just under the price of Mooney at 4,400. So yeah, I think that's the thing. And I think this is common. I'm going to look it up. I want to look it up when we get to Fantasy Labs and go through some of the contest dashboard and stuff. I'm definitely going to check it out on what some other people did in that spot, but I'm curious your thoughts here, Matt, on the perfect lineup. Again, we just look at this to see sort of what yesterday I kept saying this, but it really felt like a slate where even if you moved off, even if you were right about a situation, you almost were still wrong. For example, if you even saw the Bijan stuff, we're like, yeah, well, I'm going to go to Kirk Cousins and Mooney and I'm going to leverage him that way. Nope, wrong. Oh yeah, Rashad White's owned? That's craziness. They could use that Sean Tucker guy. I'm going to go to Baker and run that side. Oh, this home game with Spencer Rattler, it's so easy to fit if you just play him with Olave and Shaheed, and then you run it back with 1 or 2 of these Tampa Bay guys. And me and you are in this crowd that's wrong on this, very wrong. I had it too. And it's saying it's like you see this stuff and you think you've got an angle of attack, and then guess what that Rattler stack got me? A beautiful lineup with Bijan and CMC. How'd that work out for me? Not well. So it happens. It's the way it goes. That's why we love the game. But I did still love the slate. I talked about it a ton yesterday, Matt. Here is some of those ceiling scores. And I'm not expecting everyone to get to all of them, but JT, Pittman, Franklin, Breece Hall and James Cook instead of the more expensive running backs as a way to flip the build and get different. Stroud, we liked all his pieces. Maybe you didn't want to figure out the pieces. You just wanted to play him at 5,100. Again, we can show, where would you get that? I don't know. Maybe the stack rankings on Ship It Nation. It's right there, number 3. So even if you don't stack it, it can give you an idea of passing stacks to get to. Hurts, not bad yesterday. Spencer Rattler, bad. Stroud, good. Mayfield, bad. So it's hit or miss. But then like Flacco, Nix, Fields, I think Daniel Jones was right there too. Drake May, Daniel Jones. Like a lot of those were pretty good. But just give me your thoughts on this perfect lineup. We'll break it down.
So before I do that, I want to push back a little bit on the Mooney, and obviously it was the right call, but I feel like that's a classic NFL DFS 101. Like the wide receiver one's out. The wide receiver two is going to be in a better spot as far as more opportunity potentially, but also the defense can focus in on him more. So I feel like you have to look at those spots like in each individual opportunity, I should say. And in this one, I think you guys were spot on with the Mooney. I just think it kind of changes depending on who's out there, who's at quarterback, all that stuff. And on paper, it was a good spot for the Atlanta offense. I don't think anyone saw them failing completely with no one even close to the optimal because they barely scored. The thing that I noticed most about the optimal lineup is no Saquon Barkley. Just shows you how many running backs had really good days. Cook was phenomenal. I mean, Cook, Hall, and Taylor all outscored Barkley, or Hall and Cook were right there with him at lower price tags. So you could win with Barkley, especially, if you faded Bijan Robinson for him, but just really interesting that he wasn't in the winning lineup. Definitely a week. Go ahead.
Just a note, I'll just cut in quickly. Just a note on this optimal. It's a 24-point delta to the $20 Millie Maker winners. So there was lots of moves. Like you're nailing it right now. I'm saying like you could fit Barkley in here somewhere if you weren't getting to the James Cook and Shakir. So like, again, this is all just looking at the optimal to see. One of the exercises I like to do with it, and then I'll let you keep rolling, is just think about how right this is versus like what you needed to actually win. Obviously, we're not getting to the optimal very often, but we've been getting a lot closer this season. And this is a 49-9 lineup. And we'll talk more in a second. I'll let you roll it out. But yeah, there was ways to get Barkley in here instead and move another piece around and still be wrong, but still be enough to win the Millie Maker.
For sure. So I think what you talked about, how even if you were wrong, or even if you were right, you were wrong. Like, let's say you got off Bijan and played the Atlanta passing game, or played Tampa, or play New Orleans. For me, that just goes to show how many, even on a massive slate with bye weeks and stuff, how many good spots there just usually really are on any given slate. So no, it wasn't the Falcons, it wasn't the Bucks, but you talked about CJ Stroud. Buffalo was in a good spot. Indianapolis was in a good spot. It's not like anyone's surprised that those guys got there. I think it's just surprising that those guys were better than the teams that were in better spots on paper. So really, really fun NFL slate. Wasn't the best slate for me. I had one lineup in that. I can't remember what that contest was called.
Mid-season main.
Yeah, event. It was a Jet stack, like just a full Jets-Bengals game stack without Bijan, with Taylor. Didn't quite get there. Was a fun sweat for a little bit, but just showed you like how many under the radar good spots there were yesterday.
100%. And one thing I had, so a couple of weeks ago, I talked live on this show about a little bit of an epiphany that I talked about of like, I think a leak in my game early in the season during, the NFL setup of softer pricing and got to fill these Millie Makers and all that. And then I turned it around. I told everybody week 7, week 8 is where it starts to fire, and back-to-back pretty solid weeks. I think just thinking back to last night and just going through some of my thoughts as I reviewed my work, how much it is about just like getting the winning teams pieces together. If someone said to you yesterday, is Buffalo going to beat Carolina off the bye? People said, yeah, they're going to whip that ass. All right. Who could be part of that? Well, James Cook and Shakir could be part of that. Elm is more expensive. Again, these are current thoughts, and they are on results now. It's not being results oriented to how you win. It's just thinking about applying this to the future more than I built with Josh Allen. I built tons of bad lineups yesterday, and I'll show some of them off when we get to that segment in a minute. I'll show my 2 lineups that did the best in the midseason main event that I think will be helpful in explaining how I was explaining yesterday on the show about on a slate like this, where I think it's going to be, again, I was wrong on this. It wasn't a lower scoring slate, but I want to play for that, where if some of the chalk busts, I can still find my way to the top through ceiling outcomes. I'll show you what that looks like. But just thinking about the winning teams, Buffalo, crush. Indy, crush. Here's Pittman and Taylor. Philly should crush. Goddard. Here's Denver. They should crush. Franklin. Bucks against the Saints. And someone said, I think it was our guy Ryan here, made a really good point. We've talked about this a ton with these Sunday afternoon games specifically. If you're not able to get to the stacks or the pieces within the game, why not take one of the running backs or one of the defenses or something like that to make it happen? Well, if people are going to be loading up on Rattler and Olave and Shaheed and anything else, why not get a piece of that action this way? And we expect the Bucks to beat the Saints. So again, winning team, the Jets, that's a Breece Hall fitment play. You could easily move whatever you don't like here. I mean, you could put Franklin down to Noel for $700 and move. How much was Barkley yesterday? It's very,
76.
very close anyway. Franklin down would give you $800. You'd be a little bit short, I think, of going, be $100 short or something of going Cook to Barkley. And while you'd lose some points along the way, I don't know that you'd lose the full 24 that was required because Barkley still had a pretty good day. And Noel, I should say, now that they got the pronunciation a bunch over there, did not have this day, but maybe it was enough still. It'd be very close anyway. My point being, there was alternatives to this lineup where you could have moved some pieces around and still hit pretty close. So, just my thought of like just thinking about those winning pieces and then finding some of those projection options or items that go with it to make it make sense. Anything else you want to add to this lineup before we get into breaking down some of the other stuff?
Yeah, just to like that point about changing, potentially Breece Hall and Franklin. Like Breece Hall himself was in a great spot. Like this was someone, and I know you like the Flacco side a lot, and people are really down on the Jets, but if they were able to stay in this game, since he stinks on defense, Breece Hall at like 6 to 10% ownership was a really, really good play. To your point, like you didn't have to play him because there were other guys like Barkley who were just as good, but he himself was a really, really good play. So I think it just goes to the overall point of, even though the best plays weren't great yesterday, there were still other guys in good spots, and those guys just happened to do better.
So my main lineup that I threw up on the site and I talked about on Leverage Lane was Flacco, Chase, Higgins. It started a lot stronger. It obviously hurts when 3 touchdowns come from Chase Brown and Samaje Perine. But of note, we knew that Chase Brown was also in a good spot. We said this on the show. There was definitely ways you could have got to him. That's why we love the Stone. You got the report card right here. But my run backs, I didn't have them in my core, but everyone who was in the Golden Shipper or saw my main lineup in the $100 single entry, it was Breece Hall and Mason Taylor. I actually overstacked that game. I thought it was an interesting spot. Both had pretty good stack rankings, bad pass D, bad rush D. I thought Justin Fields made it easier for them to find a way in this game to be able to keep it pushed so that you'd be able to see. Sometimes people forget that for Flacco, Chase, Higgins to get there, you want them to be pushed. The Jets literally pushed them all the way to a 39-38 victory, which was pretty wild in itself when you think about life and earth and all the way things happen. I don't want to get too wooey on people, but like the Nick Mangold thing, obviously very sad news, 41 years old, passes away. He's from the area, and they go into play against the Bengals and get the win and pull it off in the end for him. So, I mean, just the way life goes, it's obviously super sad news, but the storylines and things that come with it are always interesting to follow along. But it was a crazy game, back and forth, got all the points we wanted. I just didn't have those touchdowns there, but in other lineups, definitely had Chase Brown. So when you see that stuff, it makes a ton of sense. I talked about it earlier, just looking at the Stone quickly before we get to some of these lineup breakdowns. Bijan obviously looked really good on optimal, nowhere near correct on ownership. And if you're off by that much, it really affects things. And people tell you the truth all the time. Some sites won't show it off or own up to when they're wrong. But like at the end of the day, they also show when they're fully right. Of course, that's a nice way to do things. But this really affects things because it adds ownership in other places because you have to account for it. And then you don't know. But like, for me, Acham was rolling for a bit. He looked pretty good on the other side. James Cook, huge, solid 15% to be optimal. And in this spot, big time favorites, 27.5 point team total. It's equalized as far as the rush and pass defense type of matchup. So we can see how this goes. Coming off a bye, solid leverage there. So obviously he was a play that you could get to in your lineups. We had him right as high as being cash game viable. And again, most people say, well, you'd never play him in cash. You had all those other options. It's fine. It's a cash consideration. But the point is if you can consider someone for cash, even if they're on the outskirts, you obviously have that opportunity. That's a 35-point ceiling there. We just saw it. He actually beat his ceiling with 36.6 there. So either way, just some of those thoughts I wanted to put together. I do want to give a huge congrats to our guy, Nung, 2019, another 100K winner over at Ship It Nation. We had our man, Shep Dog is in here right now, $2,500 with a Ship It, joining the winner's circle. He hit us up. Shout out to him. Our man, Marley, $4,000. Our guy Wins a Lot, who's always there to wish everybody a good morning every single day in basketball, $800 shipper. You probably saw the NBA streets this morning. And then official Vic said first bank of the NBA season hit 400 plus club, $1,000 there. So all over it as far as NBA and NFL are concerned. Absolutely love to see that. Talked about our stack rankings quick, Matt. I don't know if you have had enough time, obviously new to the site and joining us and going through all this stuff, but this is where we seem to see it every single week. Nades, when he's usually on, he's traveling back today, and you're here with us for the foreseeable future anyway to be on the show with us. I think this is interesting to look at. Obviously, there's going to be some misses along the way. You can't be perfect, but I think there's some really good hits here. And again, just looking at these stacks, anything that stands out for you?
I mean, not really. Like, as you know, I really like Rattler coming into the slate. So easy to say that it was an awful play now because he was awful. But I do think that he got undone by, turnovers have been his, have done him in. That's really been the part where he's been bad at anything all season. And yesterday it came to fruition again. He fumbled after he scrambled, on a tackle that the guy got him from behind. And then he threw that pick six where the guy like tipped it up in the air. The offense just couldn't do anything. So then he got benched. That being said, the offense wasn't doing anything. So it's not like if he stayed in, he was going to be really good. They were really cheap and in a good spot against Tampa at home. Rattler's underlying numbers have been a lot better than people think. Again, I'm not sure what's going to happen with him going forward. And yesterday turned me off completely. That's the thing that stands out the most when you look at this. But from a value perspective, it made a ton of sense, man.
Yeah. We talk about this all the time. I mean, I was in on it. Funny story, actually, if anyone saw the FanDuel result for me yesterday, that was a $15,000 late swap with one pass away. It was the end of the game, Cam Ward to DK. I'll talk about this in a second, but just he threw it to DK. I thought it was in his hands. If you look at the replay, it looks like it's going directly into his hands. And it was just almost like the Seahawks New England Super Bowl, where it was like in his hands till it wasn't. And then you're like, oh shit, the Patriots just won the Super Bowl. It was like, oh shit, I didn't win $100K. I thought DK had it. That was going to be the bonus, the touchdown for both him and Cam Ward. That would have put me to the top and win the $100K. So when, it's not close, that's how close it is. That was the sweat. It was really that close. So that was a late swap though, Matt. I had Rattler, Olave, Shaheed, Tez Johnson, and Rashad White. But I also had Bijan and Atlanta with Barkley and Goddard. So I was just hoping for kind of three things to happen. This game to go off, Bijan and Atlanta to get there together. The D hopefully would separate me, but that got steamed a little. Obviously got the London news. I felt even better about it as we talked about. That was the mistake, but that's fine. Again, I don't want to keep calling it a mistake. I just want to say there was definitely a thought process that's not results oriented that could make you think differently about that spot afterwards. Either way, I had Barkley and Goddard and they crushed. So I was in good shape, but I said, you know what? I look at all these lineups in this higher stakes tournament and they're just filled with positions left. And I know it's this Tampa New Orleans game. There's just no ownership. We talked about it on the show yesterday. Nobody was really getting to this Denver Dallas. So I could not be stuck. I'll tell you what, Rattler ended up being 8%. Everyone else was 23% or higher of the four guys that I had originally. What I decided was this is a art, not science. Matt, you probably can appreciate this one. Who do you just know is getting there on FanDuel when $10,000 Bijan fails? You just know $10,200 Jonathan Taylor is getting there. So I was like, how do I get this guy in? And I did talk about it on the show yesterday. I even mentioned Gunnar Helm and those guys too. But I said, I got to look at this stack. And it was my guy Alex doing the Leverage Lane show with me that brought this up. And it was if you had Cam Ward with DK and with Io Manor. By the way, there's no Ridley and other stuff there. It got me Jonathan Taylor. And then it still got me a piece of the Denver game, which I asked Alex about this week. I'll give him props, again, personally, as well as on the show next week. But I said, if it's not your Marvin Mims guy this week, who would it be from Denver? He said a 1, Troy Franklin. And that's exactly where my lineup landed. So I had no Tampa Bay, New Orleans, just hope that it busts. I have it in other places. And I ended up late swapping to that. And that ended up being a $15,000 positive late swap and gave me a full shot at the 100.
That deserves a round of applause. That's about as good as it gets for a late swap for like one lineup. I mean, because you're always tilting that whoever you take out is going to go nuts. So mad respect for that, man.
Appreciate it. I think people need to recognize, again, I'm not trying to big up the 15K or something like that as much as the process piece. You can, to me anyway, you cannot go into the afternoon with the same stuff everybody else has and hope to gain a min cash. You can gain the min cash quicker by finding that late swap separation where maybe even if you get 3 of those pieces right, like just Jonathan Taylor, by the way, got me the min cash. It was the chance to not only get the min cash, but also get the 100K that makes it worth it even further. So, that's how people need to be thinking, looking at it.
It's funny that you say that because I had 2 in that big midseason event. I had 2 Fields lineups and both of them, were full stacks really with Brees and no wide receivers and Mason Taylor and Chase and Higgins and Chase, both running backs from that game. I had a couple pieces left in either of them, in both of them. And I had, both of them were good, but they weren't at the top, and they weren't going to get to the top with guys other people had. So instead of Tez Johnson, I played Sterling Shepard, who ended up like under 1% owned, kind of in the same vein that you're talking about. Like, I had the money. Tez Johnson was probably, he projected a little bit better, slightly better play on paper, but he was like owned, and Shepard was under 1%. So it ended up costing me money not playing Tez there, because he got like 7 more points. But I would do that again every day of the week with the chance to win the millie there.
Yeah. 100%. And I can't talk about this more, but I will just for 2 seconds of saying, like, because the chat just asked it. My guy Andrew said, so you basically late swap. Yeah. So here's the thing. Even if this lineup, like, I have no fear. This is what's funny. Like, usually you have the FOMO, to your point, of like, oh man, it really would have sucked if Tampa Bay, it would have been for a min cash. There was no way I'm getting there. And even then the min cash would have been a struggle based on the ownership on all of these guys in that game as a whole. So you have to be willing to risk that, but know the game, know what other people are doing, pay attention to it, and then look for opportunity. That was the way to do it. Also, he missed Isle Manor on a wide open walk-in touchdown earlier in the game too. That would be like a butterfly effect thing. But I think in general, just looking at things like that, it was a way that even if 3 of my guys got there, it could have been really good. If JT at least gets there, you never know the outcome you're going to get from Franklin, JT, and all those guys. But I had the opportunity, and that's all I could give myself, and it turned out to work out this time. But I would never be mad, even if the Tampa Bay New Orleans game got there, because at most I was looking at was probably fighting for a min cash. Riding the min cash line just makes no sense. And
it almost got there. Like, it really did. Like, I feel like anyone who's saying, oh, it didn't almost get there, is just a straight hater, because clearly it was close. And you're talking about like a play or two. Now, sure, you can go back in a lot of other games and see other plays, but this was at the end of the game. Yeah, that's
it was the end of the slate, basically. The other game was the blowout. This was done. Everyone was the backups now at this point. RJ Harvey'd already scored that last touchdown. They had 3 chances down in that end zone. And then, what drives me nuts is like all the broadcast can talk about is developing Cam Ward. I'm never, cheering for this spot unless I late swap to it. So that's the only reason I care, obviously. But the point was, like, they're like, oh, they really got to develop this guy. What do? They set up a wildcat at the goal line for like one drive. The next drive, it's just a rushing touchdown. It's like, why don't you let the guy throw it for 4 downs and teach him what it's like to be in that position down there when he has pressure? And they talk about it. It is so true. When you get down that close to the end zone, it's almost like an extra defender gets added, because you're now going up against such a short window and only so much room for guys to hit their routes and get open and do things. It's not like he has the top tier receivers. It's whatever. It's the Titans we're laughing about here. So you get what you go with. But I think at the end of the day, it was the right. All I care about was the concept. Like our guy Little Neck says, who's been just absolutely crushing it in his NBA debut on the Showdown stuff and NFL side and getting everybody hooked up in the Discord, says you shouldn't even feel FOMO. No one has FOMO. That's exactly it. There would have been no worries if I didn't get there. When you would feel it is if you had a tricky decision. Like if you're in, 5th place in a $490 FFWC queue and you see that you have the same money left as someone else and you have to decide like block or whatever. And in this case, you're probably blocking them, meaning you're playing the better 2 plays, but you kind of had something else, or you thought about something else and then you changed it and then they didn't actually have what you thought they had, or they went to something different. Then you're like, damn, I could have just held strong. And then that's where you really feel the FOMO, but something like this, not at all. All right. We'll look at some more lineups in a bit from us, but let's look at some of these winning lineups here. We'll start with the Millie Maker winner, and then we'll actually see what some of the other top players that we respect did with their exposure pools. Cause to be honest, I would have thought we would have saw a lot more names up here. There's Nerdy, shout out to him. JBC is there. You see that Stunna. I know our man Hoop was up there for a while. Again, back-to-back weeks. Petty Theft is up there. There's Hoop. Yeah, 51st place. So Hoop's lineup was a similar concept to the optimal, and also kind of the way that I like to, that I just mentioned. I'd like to start building more of Indy should win, Philly should win, Tampa should win. Wow, he really got crushed by Ibuka. Man, that sucks. Buffalo should win. If the Jets win, it's because Breece Hall and New England should win. Like, this is a really solid lineup. Of course, it's in a portfolio, but just, not handpicking it. But that was the one that had the best shot.
You had another one up there, too, with Tyler Johnson. I think that's probably the one you were talking about. Like, for a lot of the day was really, really up there.
Mason Taylor. Here's the Tyler Johnson one, yeah. Man, look at this. Jamar Chase, Diggs, all these guys just didn't do nothing for him. That sucks. Either way, 2 back-to-back weeks for him, getting really close up there with that. And, it's hard to even get to the top 100 in those, let alone back-to-back weeks with multiples up there. So good for him. And I'm sure the big one's on the horizon. Let's look at BS Golfer 7. It's not often we can get this update and be able to actually see these winners. They've been slacking on getting the data in here, but this was the winning lineup. It was a Tua, Waddle, no run back. It was James Cook with the Buffalo D. It was a couple of indie guys in Pittman and Taylor. It was Hutchinson as one of the lower owned leverage options, with Kittle as a secondary, and then Breece Hall to round it out for the Jets side of things. What do you think of this lineup?
This lineup's nutty. I mean, there's no disrespect to it at all because it won $1 million, but it's out there for sure. Like, you can make reasonable, when you pick it apart, you can certainly go in and see why, each play is a good play based on, what a lot of what you like to do. Like Hutchinson, for instance, was the lowest owned out of Noel and Higgins, but man, just a lot of wild cards, I should say, in this lineup.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that, it still fits some of the mold of what you think could happen on a slate, but it's not like I guess the Waddle situation, we've got a little bit more information on. We've seen what it's been like for him as a quote unquote wide receiver one, or trying to be one. It hasn't always worked out, but in this case, even then, it was a 20-point game. It's more than enough, but it's not like he broke the slate or something. I do like this little flip here. Instead of it's like a double entendre, because instead of going to, or maybe even like a triple, because instead of going to Schultz, you're not playing him, you're playing George Kittle. Instead of going to Schultz and going to Cole, you're going to Hutchinson. So you get that little secondary stack, but in a really high leverage way that most people won't have that combo. You play both Taylor and Pittman. Again, you don't have the money for Daniel Jones, so you're playing the Tua side. If you're not going to be on, anybody from that Cincy side, whether it's Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, whatever it might be, or the defense or anything, I don't mind playing Breece Hall. Also, people have to remember yesterday, Breece Hall was a leverage play against the Cincy defense. The Cincy D was also, I don't want to say out of control. Let me check the numbers on it. But what was the Cincy D on the slate? 2,700?
Yeah.
Can I find it here? Cincy D was 14% owned. So again, it's not high versus 100%, but for a defense, that's obviously
high.
Yeah, very high for a defense. So just noting that there was that factor to it as well. And then you had the Buffalo combo pack there again against Carolina. Good spot. Makes sense. If you're pairing, how does James Cook get there? Typically Buffalo is leading the game. They're up huge and he gets the rushing that causes it, and maybe a little bit more because they're up there. So it's not crazy to me. I think it's a fine lineup. And at the end of the day, it blew out second place. This was what I was talking about though yesterday of again, looking for some of these ceiling opportunities. Maybe Tua's not where you're going to find it, but also you got to remember only 4,800. But people liked Cousins. People liked Bijan. If that was going to happen, you'd think it would have to push these guys. You don't need to run it back. But I think the bigger thing is under 1%, 10%, under 10%, under 5%, under 10%. This is where it's sure, but that makes you get away with everything else. But yeah, overall, really high leverage lineup. That's, to me, not that bad when you think about just secondary stacks, teams that should win, or if they're going to win, it could put them in a spot for these things to come through, like Breece Hall, like Cook with his defense. So anything else you got to add on this one? If not, well, let's look at some of these exposures.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing for me, and when I meant nutty, I mostly meant wild in the sense that since he scored 38 points, no one from Cincy in this lineup. Philly scored a ton of points, no one from Philly in this lineup. Denver scored a ton of points, no one from Denver in this lineup. So just really, really interesting in that regard.
Crazy that in the second place lineup, well, you do see some of the similar stuff like Noel, you get the high leverage in something like Tampa Bay, et cetera, but you do see Goddard with Devonta Smith. And I know everyone was, against the Josh Allen. He had to rush some in and do all his stuff, but obviously he could have got there, but they fit him in with everything. So really close, this is the next line. Not close on the scorecard, but it was even a high delta from second to third. You don't often see 13 points, 7 points, and then everybody tight. You don't see that too often, right?
A 20-point difference between first and third is extremely rare in that size contest.
Yeah, and Jerry Matt, who's an awesome dude, says a lot of contrarian leverage plays on the Millie, which happens 3 or 4 times a season. Only wild one that produced that surprised me is the Tua Waddle. This does play a lot of starters. That's your latter point that's so important here. Tua, we've seen again. It's not like they played good at all. They played horrible, but that's what I always tell people about that come into these shows. Like, yeah, there's no way they can do good. They've been bad for 7 weeks.
Right.
Yeah, well, week 8's week 8. It has zero to do. It's not the first 7 weeks, and anything can happen. He played better with one eye than he did with two. So you see how it works sometimes. He came out and just went off. I think in general, this lineup is actually not the again, Jerry, I respect everything you're talking about here. I'm just saying in general, it's not even a shot at you, but the line, and might not even be saying this, but when people talk about those over leveraged lineups that they're like, wow, that's insane. This is not that for me. Like, I really don't think it's that crazy to hone in on Buffalo and Indy, some secondary stacks that a lot of people were already trying to find. Like, if you're not on CMC and Knoll, why not have Kittle and Hutch? Like, I get it. Like, I honestly do. And maybe the Hutch play is throwing people off, but when you have Schultz and when you have Knoll as popular plays, why not Hutchinson? He'd already had a touchdown this season too. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty solid lineup to me. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a solid lineup. I mean, I think people are just really thrown off by the Tua and Waddle like combo here, especially with the news coming in of Tua being sick and stuff. But that just goes to your point. Like, each week is its own entity. Like, sure, you have to take what we saw in the first 7 weeks and you can't just totally disregard them, but you also can't say that because that happened in the first 7 weeks, that will definitely happen in week 8. And because he had such low ownership on those guys and they were so cheap, gave him so much leeway in other spots on the lineup. So yeah, to your point, really, really well-built lineup. I'm sure it was clearly in a portfolio, but nice plays all around for sure. I wish it were mine.
So yeah, me too. Same page on this, Jerry. I think in general, like for Jerry Matt 88, for those who don't know him, but just noting it. But yeah, this is exactly it. It's definitely not the crazy lineup when people look at it and like, what the ones, Matt, where it's like, that's such a shitty lineup, but at least he won the Millie, so you can't hate on him. Like, yes, that's what people like to say, but I think that lineup was actually fine. A lot of it makes sense too, by the way. Like, it's leveraged in different ways that some might not think about, and whether or not they meant to, I don't know. But like, if you're playing Tua and Waddle, how many people have Bijan there instead of JT? See what I'm saying? Like, there's levels to it. There's other thought processes that have to go into it that you're thinking about. Now, I know a lot of people don't play a portfolio or play 150. These are very sound process pieces you can apply to your own hand builds or your main entries or whatever it is that you want to do. Or when you are virtually hand building, look for these things in your set. Go ahead.
No, just to that point also, like how you were saying that, sometimes people win Millie lineups with, lineups that other people really, really criticize. And sure, there is something to that, but there's also something to be like to getting away from the groupthink and doing stuff for yourself and trying to get first in a 170,000 person tournament. So even if the lineup like is a little bit out there, I don't think that's a bad thing in tournaments, especially of this size.
Yeah, I just want to showcase one more thing. Someone talks about it. Andrew again says seeing second place Alan Cook lineup. Saber likes to give me. It didn't work, and not because it came. It worked for 100K. It's nothing against the player that you. I'm just telling you, like I've told you guys 100 times. It didn't even work. Cook worked, and it led to that. But Josh Allen, every time Cook got in, hurt Josh Allen, and they actually were priced much better than you'll see. Typically, people are looking at it from like Jalen Hurts at 7,500 and a $8,000 or $7,900 Barkley. Even worse because of the tush push. Again, results is looking at it and saying, "Oh, it almost won." First of all, it did, and it was 13 points back. Second of all, everything he does hurts him. So it'll give it to you. You're allowed to manipulate the setup. You're allowed to change what you do in there. It's not saying it can't work. It's not saying it doesn't correlate and make sense. Of course it can. We see onslaughts win. I don't avoid these. I'm just telling you, when you sit there and say it gives me these and it was the second place lineup, it doesn't matter that it finished second. That's just the result of this particular lineup. Even looking at like this, like Daniel Jones 6,100. Obviously, when $9,500, where was it here? This one didn't have it. This one has Jonathan Taylor to show his score, though. When he gets 40, it affects Daniel Jones getting to his 30 plus that you'd kind of want to see, or your Michael Pittman stacks with Daniel Jones, or if you had Warren in there, which probably nobody up here has him, but trying to see if there was one. Yeah, Warren, 9. Like, that's what stops these things from happening. And this lineup could have done a lot more. if DK catches that touchdown, or if some of that Taylor love from 40 points gets spread out to, let's say one of those touchdowns goes to Daniel Jones and Warren. Well, now you're adding 10 more points here. Now you're up to 217. That's a $95,000 swing. And Jonathan Taylor comes back some, but it wouldn't quite be enough. So yeah, it's basically, yeah, Jonathan Taylor's there. So this guy here wins 100 grand instead. If just one of those Taylor touchdowns goes, again, ifs and buts, we know this. I'm the first to go there. I'm saying that's how you have to see this stuff. So as far as the stacking question goes, is it viable and does it work and does it simulate well? Yes, it's very fine. I'm just saying it's still something you want to monitor in the pricing factor. And we usually talk about that when it comes to Hurts and Barkley, because the tush push factor extends it even further. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I got to jump in here because I think all of the points you made are really good. My pushback would be, and it's not like you don't know this, you're just saying the other side of this. I'm looking for the outlier results, right? I'm looking for the times the QB throws touchdown passes to the running backs. Now, certainly, like yesterday in my Fields lineup, I played Breece and Chase Brown. Breece Hall scoring those touchdowns on the ground hurt Fields. But if one of those is through the air, then all of a sudden you're looking at like a much more massive score. So I don't think it's something where you look at and you're like, I don't want to play quarterbacks with running backs. I also don't think it's something you want to look at and be like, I have to play a running back with my quarterback in every lineup. You know what I mean?
I think price matters so much, and people ignore this. We play a salary-based game. When you're pairing up a $4,400 quarterback in Cousins with Bijan, well, it didn't work yesterday. Now you're looking at like 13 grand for two guys where you think the guy just at 8,800 alone could break the slate and score 40 and do well for that. It's when you're looking at 8K and 7K or 7K and 7,500 and all the price matters.
That's a great point. That's a really, really great point.
And I want to extrapolate on it so people get it further because it goes to the passing game too. When it's Burrow for 7,500 and Chase for 9,500 and Higgins for 7,600, that takes so much work to get there. And that's what people can't understand. Well, Cam Ward, DK, and Io Manor are not, and I'm using this as a random example, but just the first thing, when those guys were at full pop pricing for those three Bengals, they're not the same players, but that's priced in. But we need fantasy points. If that stack goes off, you are getting a QB1, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver. You're getting the same combo, but you don't need the same output. Because you're getting it for like what would it be? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
and you're not getting Jonathan Taylor with it like you did yesterday is the point.
You're getting 3 for 2. You buy 2, get 1 free on that setup, and then you're getting a running back that's way more likely to put up 40 or can put up 40 a lot more. So things like that matter. Fields, Breece, much cheaper. Exactly. Like, did it work out? No, I'm just saying like those are the examples where we're talking 12K versus 16K. And the $4,000 is the difference from your $5,500 running back that you're trying to figure out versus your $9,500 Jonathan Taylor 40-point output with a minus 425 to score and like 103-yard all-purpose props on the ground, all purpose. So just noting that type of stuff, I think is pretty interesting. Let's see some names we know that scored some cash here. That Stun is a good dude. I'll check his profile for a second here. He went under. This is what I think is interesting about doing this type of exercise, Matt. And then we'll look at a couple more lineups and get out of here. But Bijan ended up coming in 55% in this $20. Do you think this was a field stand and then all of a sudden it boosts even 16% higher? Like if you look, I mean, 40 is a pretty solid number. You had to think he was somewhere in that 40% range. It looks almost like he was like, I'll just take the field on this guy. But I'm going to get way over on Breece Hall, for example. And then this is like, holy shit, I can't believe he came in at 60.
Yeah, he ended up, and that's kind of how my set was in the $20 milli, where I just kind of wanted to be on the field with Bijan, ended up under because he ended up so much higher owned than, was expected. And to go back to that second place lineup real quick, because I think the point that you were almost making, and I might be off here, that lineup had Cook and Allen, but it came in second, like despite Allen. Allen was not like the reason it came in second. It just everything around it was. So you certainly didn't need Allen. And actually you would have been better off with a lot of other guys other than Allen.
Well, yeah, let's see if I can find, someone said it too. Like you see a lot of quarterbacks next. So Hurts had 25. That's 2 more and $1,100 or sorry, and $900 because I think he was what, 6,600 yesterday. Yeah. So anyway, where you spend it, I don't know, but he would have just as easily went with your Smith Goddard, play your little combo here instead if you want to do that and hope that Shakir does something in that range, or use Shakir as a way to boost and get even more money out of something else because you had to punt to Noel and Franklin. You would have had $1,100 more. You could have went up and got something totally different here if you just do that same lineup with the quarterback that goes with this 2 pass catchers, where I think, if these two hit their actual ceiling, like I said yesterday, I think Hurts comes along a lot more than you need Allen with Cook and Shakir. Again, an optimizer gave this. It's leveraged. It's unique. It's different. I get it. Support all that. We have partnerships with SaberSim. That's the best optimizer out there. When you put our stuff in and combine the two of them together, I don't see a better combination on the market. But my point being, it's easy to nitpick it afterwards, but a lot of people asking and watching this are trying to apply this to their single entry stuff or trying to apply this to their main build. If you landed here, I would just go Hurts, not even results oriented. Like if these guys ceiling out, if you get 2 Devonta Smith touchdowns in the bonus and 1 touchdown and a good day from Goddard at a 1Z position, that's 3 touchdowns. And then whatever tush push you get or something at a Jalen Hurts, he would smash for $1,100 less. You'd be able to do whatever you want. Maybe it's just pump Shakir up to someone else at 6,200. I don't know. And maybe that's Diggs or someone. I don't know who's 6,200 on this slate. No, what you do, actually go back here, put Noel here, which makes sense, and get Breece Hall in your lineup, and boom, you win the millie.
You win the millie. You win the millie.
Prime example. Yeah, just a prime example. It's easy to see it after with results. A lot of people get their head stuck in the mud on that. That's not what we're doing. We're saying, how could you apply some process to a lineup here that would make some sense, and that would make sense. And that's just finding the nut outcome is what makes it tricky. But yeah, we're just giving you an example. So, all right, I'll skip off this. I'm curious to see maybe like, let's just go back here to the 150. Shady. What did he have? Exposures. Bijan 35. A lot of the people I'm seeing that play had, what did you have to him? Bijan 43. I mean, everyone's kind of sitting in that 40% range, not one to commit too much. So Utica had 61%. So if you feel bad about playing them, I mean, you feel good about these spots. Our man Hoop, 41% about the field. I think like a lot more people are kind of coming in that 40% range. Nerdy had 36%. So a lot of the best players were up in that range. My guy Breeze is a super underrated player that just crushes, 50%. Kind of feeling that range, right? People weren't trying to get too overweight. Utica was overweight. My man Squirrel Patrol, 45%. So a lot of people in this range.
I feel like Bijan was one of those ones yesterday where the less ball the better. Because Bijan is so good, Miami is so bad that it's like, how do you not want to just play Bijan? You know what I mean? Like, he's so good, Miami's so bad, but that's DFS for you.
Yeah. And again, same, we already gave this one, but it can happen. That's what people got to, I'm not saying to turn it off. I'm just telling you, if you're looking at your lineup, and I use the Josh Allen one as the prime example there, definitely a spot where you could have, it would have made a lot more sense if you were looking at it to build it with Hurts and just get what you get. I made the obvious, like, get to Breece and win the millie. That's that's the cheater way of like saying like, yeah, you could do that and get to the millie. But I'm just saying that it made more sense with Hurts in there to not cannibalize the top piece, to give the full ceiling to those other guys, maybe still rushes in and takes from Barkley, who you're also not on. And then on top of it, it just all makes more sense together, and it gives you $1,100. Where you choose to spend it, up to you. The lineup just would have made more sense. All right, let's look at the 11-11. This is the winner. You can decipher this one first, and then I'm going to show a couple of my lineups and just talk through process and get your thoughts on it as well. But here's Bo Nix to Franklin, no run back, Taylor with his defense, James Cook, Breece Hall, Waddle with Mooney Mini, and then the Breece Hall Taylor is actually a mini combo pack, which again makes a lot more sense. You're talking about $9,600 for 2 guys that don't require Fields to come along with them and could easily just still put it together against the Bengals. What's your thoughts on this lineup?
Well, my first thought is that the Breece Hall to Mason Taylor touchdown pass certainly didn't hurt this lineup. Helped mine also, because you got the halfback pass. Obviously not going to get that all that often, but when it does, having both of them is certainly going to help. My thoughts on this lineup were obviously no Bijan in this tournament was massive because he was even high around here, or he was close to about the same. I think he was 55 here. So he was about the same. Yeah.
58. This is another thing in the high
Okay.
stake stuff where shit just gets out of hand. Like almost 40% Mooney, 40% Dalton Schultz. Like it's a onesie position that you can break. This is the thing. So we'll look at it and see. But when the chalk condenses even more in the higher stake stuff, this is where you can find some of that leverage. And this lineup had a less than 10% Waddle, less than 10% Franklin, less than 10% Taylor, defense to cut into Taylor, and also Taylor. 28% to your point, 30% less than Bijan. That's a massive gap in a large field like this where he can crush him like he did 40 to whatever. So that helps for sure.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, you said it best. Like you took the words out of my mouth. A 30% ownership gap between Taylor and Bijan here is just insane. Obviously, no one expected that going in. This lineup played his cards right. Very low owned. Franklin, as you mentioned, Waddle was really good. The nut scores you needed yesterday were from the running back position, and he had 3 of the 4 and didn't play Bijan. That's what got him there.
Yeah. Really good lineup overall. Congrats to Brad Batten. I'm going to look up and see if I can find I had 4 tickets to this yesterday. I played 7 total. This was the lineup on the show. I'm going to bring this one up because we talked about this yesterday. And I said, I actually found a Daniel Jones lineup that was, and it was creeping up until Jonathan Taylor continues to go off. But of note, I think that was helping this one. When we look at my cousin's lineup that, again, trying to get different with it, didn't work. I had a Bo Nix lineup that I'll show you. I'll show you these top 3 that cash just to give you some ideas of how I'm thinking about things and get your thoughts. But this is when I said, I'm going to try and cover angles here and see how it works out. And so I went with, I'm going to leave out Bijan and play Achane. I'm going to play that the game script flips. And so I'm starting there. I'm also going to play Jones, Pittman, and Warren. Nobody's paying up at tight end. I don't need a run back in this one. I did like that spot. I talked about that game a bunch. And I ended up even going to the Ward stuff, like I said, my late swap on FanDuel. But just noting it was okay. If I'm not on Bijan and I'm not on Taylor, how does that work? Oh, I'm going to try and go Achane instead of Bijan. I'm going to run Jones, Pittman, and Warren, which flips the build a little bit, but it's also going to keep me balanced. Who are the other balanced running backs? Well, why not Saquon Barkley? And to flip the Tampa Bay New Orleans game, I'm going to go with Kamara and the New Orleans D. Talked about that earlier. Someone had it in the chat. I'm not playing Chase Brown or Jamar Chase, so I'm going to throw in Higgins as the one-off in this one. Obviously, like Joe Flacco, I had him in one of my mains. And then in my main, actually, and it didn't cash in this, but just noting this, Franklin as a piece of the Denver-Dallas game. So I really tried to think about it. I'm not going to over-correlate, but I'm not going to avoid the good spots. And I'm going to look for leverage on the chalk. Look at all these guys under 10%, even though many of them were close. These are the guys I look for. They're good plays. People are talking about them, but they're not clicking them.
Right.
10%, 3%. So give me your thoughts on this, but I feel like I covered what a lot of people were thinking about just in a different way.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. First off, what you just said, I never really thought about it like that, but I'm definitely going to take that and put that into my memory bank. When the guys are like 10 to 15, 8 to 15% on NFL slates, they're good plays. People just think there are slightly or better plays, but that doesn't mean that those good plays can't be better. I really like that way of looking at it. I think you're spot on in this roster construction. Honestly, when I look at this compared to the winning lineup, the only real reason that winning lineup got there over a lineup like this is because of Breece Hall and James Cook going absolutely berserk. Like otherwise, similar pieces, you actually had better pieces than that lineup outside of those 2 guys. So them's just the break sometimes. All in all, a really good lineup here.
And I think the Taylor thing is the big factor. Like I said, it wouldn't have won the tournament for me or anything, but for all the lineups at the top that have Taylor lose 6 to 7 points, and if it goes to Pittman for the bonus plus a touchdown, you could be adding, 13, 14 in there. Let's say it's like 177-ish or somewhere pushing that range. Maybe it's even a little higher with some of the other stuff that happens in the passing game. Now you're up more in this range, and all the Taylor teams up here, which is, I think, maybe this one isn't Jeremy from ETR. Most of these have Taylor. There's 1 or 2 that don't. 3, call it 4, I'm up more in that range. It's like, that's the difference, right? That's why I think that's important. I'm not looking, again, ifs and buts, we talk about all the time, but just concept wise, this was the other one. How can I get different with the Kirk Cousins news, the Mooney news, and all of that? And it was obviously to fade Bijan. If I'm fading Bijan, I want Taylor. I want Mooney and Pitts. I don't just want Mooney at high ownership. So let me cut into it with Pitts and Cousins. Obviously, that didn't work because Pitts ended up getting steamed as well. But just looking at this one, and you can see some of the right pieces in the wrong places. But Cousins, Mooney, Pitts, let me game stack it to really get those guys pushed through Achane and Waddle. It flips the Bijan twice because you move it around. If I'm not on Bijan, let me get Taylor in there with his defense. It gets me to Tez. There's no cheapy Houston guy in this lineup. And I'm going to put James Cook in this spot. I'm just going to fade I have a lot of the Cincy and Jets game in other places. The Denver-Dallas game is right here in my Bo Nix spot. So just I always call this, I don't hear anyone really mention this, Matt, but I call it portfolio manipulation. I can do whatever I want with my 7 lineup portfolio. I'm trying to have thoughts around how can I be in similar places in different ways, still find some leverage that can sneak my way to the top. And like, obviously, if I'm not on Bijan, how can I get there to double whammy it? And my thoughts are like Achane on the other side pushes the Cousins stack needing to score, which now pushes Waddle back and forth. And I'm not on Bijan, so why not? I have the money. I can get to Jonathan Taylor. You know, things like that I'm moving around these moving pieces. Any thoughts on this one? Any different?
No, same thing. I just think the guys, you know, in their first lineup were a little bit better. You know, this lineup is kind of a similar type build. You know, you had Taylor here. Mooney ended up being really popular, wasn't good. You kind of replaced Saquon for James Cook here, had Achane in both. Again, the big, you know, difference was not having the guy in first had Breece Hall instead of Achane, you know, along with some other different things. But in order to really get to the top yesterday, you needed those 3 35-point guys, or 3 of the 4 35-plus point guys.
Yeah, it'd be really close here for like a Breece Hall, still have the 3-1, and then swap Tez up to T. Higgins. It'd be $100 away from that. So maybe there was some ways to flip it around. Jerry had asked about this lineup, said if you just curious if you forced the Saints D. I just don't mind the combo of the two. It was really way more about what I wanted to get everywhere else. There was obviously ways like I could have made Franklin into Noel and had $700 more to go to a 3KD and get something there. But for me, I like, I'm fine with that combo. And it's like, if it's going to hurt, if Kamara's up, the defense could maybe be there pinning them back. It ended up being the opposite side of that defense that you needed, but the game did bust up. I thought we could see more Kamara with no Kendre Miller, which wasn't really being talked about at all. So I thought there was an opportunity there.
I also had Saints D in my top lineup in that tournament.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, I'm looking in this.
They were 2,300.
This lineup, I mean, this tournament, also has like 5,000 entries, and a lot of people are playing the full max or whatever like that in it. So if you're looking at exposures for a second, you could literally play 150 lineups in it, and that's like you get to see right on this, and it's people don't want their stuff all public and whatnot, but anybody, it's a free tool, so I don't feel as bad just going through and letting it be seen. But like at the end of the day, you can see those playing 150. They know what they're doing. They can afford to lose this money. Like this is money they have from DFS. They're in great spots. They've won Millie Makers tons, things like that. All these opportunities exist because of that. But you could play 150. So for me, when some people would look at it and say like, oh, those are a bit too out there, or I wouldn't have thought of that, or you could have just done this and all that. I agree, but you can only do so much. And when you're playing with your portfolio, you kind of want to have ways to get to the top that are different without backing yourself fully into a corner of like needing all 1%ers. And that's why I brought up that point of, 7 to 15% owned plays. Everyone's talking about them enough that they're getting played, but a lot more talk than walk. And that's what makes them like, they're good enough, but they're not that good. And that's the concept of it. So just 1 second here. What the heck? Bo Nix, Sutton, Franklin with CD Lamb and a 4 wide receiver flex. This is a bit out there, but just noting it, just of looking at this, stuck with my Kamara play in that game. Went to Barkley. I was fine with that. Went to my Higgins one-off again. no Bijan. So I played Pitts, and then I had the Houston defense since I'm not going up against, I'm not playing CMC. I'm not doing anything like that. Where this missed it is there was no Indy option in this lineup, right? And maybe I go to like a Pittman here and get different somewhere else, or, move Houston down to the Saints D again and get a Pittman here as a piece of that game and just go with Knicks, Franklin, CD. But again, trying to shoot for the top here, and it missed completely. But I like the builds, and you see, like, I'm still hovering in those 7s, 8s, 9s, 4s, mixed with like 20s and under. So I don't know. This is just looking for those ceiling scores. If the chalk fully busts, it did on some, not on others. But this is kind of how I think about lineups when I'm building. Any final thoughts from you or further thoughts on this lineup before we get out of here?
No, did you want to pull up mine or no time?
We can. Yeah, well, for sure. What do you want me to look at? This tournament?
No, yeah, this tournament, because I had one that was close in that one. But again, kind of just the Sterling Shepard. Just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. Kind of just went an onslaught on the Jets-Bengals game. But just give me your take on it.
Yeah, I think this was fine. This is kind of what we talked about earlier, though. Like, you're getting 11,100 for what could be the entire end zone. And then even adding in Mason Taylor only puts it up. Like, I honestly think James Cook and Josh Allen was the same price as the three of these guys for a quarterback one, running back one, and tight end one, who's essentially a wide receiver one with no Garrett Wilson. So just noting it, well, you said it, like, yeah, we're not looking for that outcome. That's right back to my point about it's daily fantasy. It's one slate. Will Mason Taylor and Breece Hall connect for a touchdown ever again? Probably never. And it doesn't matter. That's not why you played them together. That was just the bonus on top. It's the whole point of it. But overall, the overstack of the game works just fine. The Sterling Shepard is to get unique and a bit aggressive there, I would say. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But I don't know. Did you late swap to Shepard and defense against, or what'd you do here?
So I had Tez Johnson in there instead. But I was kind of going back and forth with them. And I figured Tez Johnson was going to be significantly higher owned, which he was. It's not like he was, crazy highly owned. And I probably just should have went with Tez because he was the better play. Probably overthought it. But again, it's that fine line, right? Like, if Shepard ends up scoring that fade touchdown, then we're not having this conversation.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is, like, with Brown, Chase, Higgins, it's tough to say. I'll probably look for the $400 and hope that it's Flacco chucking it to them. And you had it a little, just because if you're going to ceiling out, right, on these guys completely, if all three of them are getting there, but then it's like, maybe you don't play Chase once you do that and it gets you there. So we were very close, because all I did differently is I had Flacco here. I had somebody else here. And then we weren't very close. I should say we were different in other spots, but I think mine was Taylor and the D with Noel, and maybe it was, mine was Bijan, which got nowhere, obviously. Joe Flacco, and then Derrick Henry with Bijan, Noel, and whatever defense that landed me on. So it's not like we were far off. It's just that's how I saw it differently. But I think the overstack of that game was plenty fine. And for a tournament like this, same reason we talked about, that's kind of what you're. It looks like you had a week like me. You kind of broke even or made slight money in this tournament based on your entries versus that. That's what it's all about, is, trying to put yourself in that position. This was Fields with Breece, with Brown, with Jamar. Yeah, like I like this one better. From, like, if you're going to combo all four up, it's like Jamar just does enough at his price. He's popular, but what's the way to get different with him? Then you've got your secondary with Shepard, your Philly guys, and Bijan. So again, people see this and like, oh, but it did worse. I like this build better than your previous.
I do too.
Build.
Do too. And it's easy to pick apart the Shepard play today, but man, like, you're talking about a piece from that game that we really liked. That was the wide receiver 3, because I'll still say Tez is the 2, at under 1% ownership. So it didn't work out clearly, and I big brained it, and I shouldn't have played him, but I don't think it was like that bad of a play on that slate.
I like it better like this. So where you got two guys that can push each other, like two,
Fair.
Like rock star, get open for an 80-yard bomb. Then it's like the other way. Baker finds his guy, Shepard, playing with him back in the college days and whatnot. Like, that could separate, but then you don't necessarily need Rattler or Baker. It's just these guys come through at the $4,500, $4,700 range. This quad pack makes more sense because of pricing and ownership. Like, if you're already going to play Chase at ownership, how do you play him differently? Well, you do it with these three guys with him. this is the whole end zone. You hope they're running and scoring and maybe he passes them one, whatever. But for 11-1, easy combo pack. You've got Bijan, not JT. It doesn't matter. But in this case, you've already got a Bijan in there. So you've got different separation plays. And then Goddard and the D, it's not about correlation. It's just like that's how you got to that spot instead of playing Schultz or like higher or like Cincy D and all that, like different percentages. So I think this one's better overall. But anyway, good lineups for you. And overall, a fun week. We still got Showdown tonight. I know Hoop Title myself will be back at 2 p.m. Eastern to break that down for you. Matt, any final thoughts on the classic slate stuff before we get out of here?
Yeah, so just real quick on my two lineups, because I'm sure people will be thinking this, like, why did I play Shepard in both? Well, the real reason I left Shepard in the better one was because before Taylor went off for that 40, that lineup was actually in a much worse spot. So it's kind of one of those things where you do as much as you can with the late swap, but you still don't know everything going in. So again, like, you can't beat yourself too much the day after. It's DFS. It's fun. You're not always going to get to the top, but we're always going to be chasing it. So, man, had another great show. Really good time doing this with you. Yeah, always love breaking it down, man. This was definitely a fun one. You guys can check us out again next week, same time, same place. If you want to check out Ship It Nation, the time to do it is now. We talked about it before, but another really big weekend. Congrats again to our guy Nung. That is 3 of the last 4 weeks with a 100K winner, but a ton of other 800, 4,000, 1,000, 2,500. Doesn't matter what your bankroll is. You can afford $19 to check it out. That's for sure. Ship 19 gets you 5 days for $19, all access with SaberSim. But it's mainly that we just have a ton of people winning, 10x their money, 15x their money. The 100Ks are the standouts. This is 3 and 4 weeks with a bunch of 50Ks mixed in, waiting on our 5th Millie Maker winner. That'd be nice to see. But just in general, it's a fun community. The Discord's amazing. Everybody talks about it. There's a ton of testimonials. You can go to the page. You can check out Winner's Circle. You can go to more and see all the testimonials of people talking about the site and what you'll get. And you can try it out for $19. Click Join the Nation. Go to either the core or starter monthly all access plan and use the code SHIP19. That's going to do it for this week, guys. For Matt, for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.